cop who put his badge on the line for justice.
You know the name Doug Poppa?
Yes, I do. God bless Doug Poppa, an honest cop.
I was elated, of course, but then as he testified, I was somewhat concerned for him, because I knew that they were probably going to crucify that man.
Sometimes the truth has a price. That may be the lesson of a Virginia police officer who says, in trying to do the right thing, he ended up paying for it.
The message you're sending is, see, we did it, Doug. You don't come out, you don't buck the system. No matter what the reason is, you just can basically keep your mouth shut. But if I wouldn't do it all over again, I would take the badge and I would leave it on somebody's desk and get out of police work. Because the day I can't tell the truth because somebody's pressuring me, and the day the system doesn't want me to tell the truth because somebody's pressuring me, is the day I'd leave the badge on the desk and walk away.
Poppa was fired for insubordination. One man who confronted truth and consequences.
From Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Doug Poppa, Truth and Consequences podcast.
I don't think it was so recognized as some of the other scandals, specifically by the NYPD. Like, for instance, Frank Serpico. Frank Serpico was a corrupt narcotics cop, or he exposed corruption, and they had the Knapp Commission following that. Frank Serpico. Frank Serpico was a corrupt narcotics cop, or he exposed corruption.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 101 of the Truth and Consequences podcast with Doug Poppa. It's Sunday, March 13th, 2022. The time is 15:55 hours. That's 3:55 p.m. Pacific time. The video clip you just watched was from a podcast called Police Off the Cuff, which aired on Thursday night, March 10th, 3 days ago. Now, I didn't watch this thing live. I don't watch a lot of these podcasts. I watch bits and pieces of different podcasts. I was apprised of it by one of my sources, a Metro cop out here. And he said, that one of the detectives on the show had commented that Frank Serpico was a corrupt narcotics cop. So I watched the thing after it at the stream live. And I thought the remark was disgusting, completely false. And I just couldn't understand why a retired NYPD cop would make a statement about that, about Frank Serpico. It's just mind-boggling to me. Anyway, I went on their channel and I wrote this comment. And I said, retired NYPD detective and NYPD Medal of Honor recipient Frank Serpico was the first police officer in American history to expose widespread corruption in a police department. Frank Serpico was not, and I capitalized NOT, a corrupt narcotics cop, as Phil Grimaldi described him in this live podcast. It's a shame that the other retired detectives did not interject and correct the statement made by Grimaldi. And the reason why I said that is you had the sergeant that hosts that show, retired sergeant, NYPD, 27 years, also identifies himself sometimes as a college professor or a former college professor. And the other detective on the show with Grimaldi was Tommy Dades, who's also a retired NYPD cop. I watched the entire episode thinking that at some point one of them would have corrected Grimaldi and say, wait a minute, the comment you just made about Frank Serpico is not true. Frank Serpico was not a corrupt narcotics cop. He was completely the opposite. So, but that didn't happen. So what happened yesterday morning, Saturday, which was March 11th, I wanted to review that video again, their episode. And when I went to their channel, the entire episode from Thursday, March 10th was deleted off their channel. And then I noticed this here. Okay. Now, they said later yesterday afternoon they were going to premiere that episode talking about the mafia cops, which they talked about on Thursday, and they're the two corrupt NYPD cops, both now deceased, Stephen Caracappa and Louis Eppolito. They were hitmen for the mob and on all kinds of stuff. Anyway, so they deleted the original episode on Thursday, And they premiered this as the premiere, but actually it wasn't a premiere because the premiere happened on Thursday. So anyway, they called it a premiere. So it came on and I watched it. And what happened with this episode, it was the same exact episode that I watched on Thursday, except in this one, they edited out Phil Grimaldi's comments about Frank Serpico. It's completely removed from this one, and this one is still on their channel. So when I saw that, I went on their channel and I wrote this comment because people were saying, isn't this the same episode? Have like a chat room and then you could see the old chats, even, you weren't watching the show live. And I said, this is a reissue of the same episode from March 10. They edited out Grimaldi's comment about Frank Serpico being a corrupt cop, which was total BS. How about a public apology, guys? That's what I wrote. Now, last night, let me get back to something. On Thursday, I believe Frank Serpico commented on the original episode that aired on Thursday. It was still up on their channel. And let me get this up over here. Okay. I'm going to get me off for a second here so you can take a quick look here. Okay. This is what Frank Serpico responded on the first episode. It seems Grimaldi, for reasons only he knows, has slandered my good name and honorable conduct as an NYPD detective in the company of two other retired detectives, one of them an expert in the field, and neither uttered not a peep of correction, which in my opinion is tantamount to aiding and abetting. Shameful indeed. This is what the NYPD and its minions have been giving me for payback for exposing systemic corruption in their department. Like I said, Frank Serpico wrote that on the original video. Now, the original video is gone, so you can't see his comment anymore, or my comment, or any of the people's comments on the show. So last night, they aired a new episode that had nothing to do with the other episode about the mafia cops. It had to do with Gabby Petito, the murdered girl's family, filing a lawsuit against the gentleman who killed her. And this is what they said at the opening. And I'll play that here in a second, as soon as we get it going here.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon. I'm a retired 27-year veteran of the NYPD. I retired as a sergeant on a Manhattan North Homicide Squad. And with me tonight is straight out of Brooklyn, retired NYPD detective Phil Grimaldi. Phil, I just wanted to say something. The other night when we did the show on the Mafia cops, you had misspoke about something, and it sort of just flew by us. You want to correct that?
Sure. We were in the heat of the conversation. We were talking about the largest corruption scandal in the history of the NYPD, which was Louis Ippolito and Stephen Caracappa, the mafia cops. And I referenced one of the other scandals that was famous in the NYPD, Frank Serpico. When I referred to Frank, I said Frank Serpico was a corrupt narcotics cop, or he exposed corruption, and they had the Knapp Commission following that. What I meant to say was Frank Serpico was a narcotics cop, and he exposed corruption leading to the Knapp Commission. Now, I never met Frank. I don't know Frank. He was retired way before I got on the job, and I had no reason to disparage him. So I just wanted to correct that.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew as soon as I heard it that it was just a slip of the tongue, knowing you and Bill. But just for our audience who may not know who Frank Serpico is, because you have this global audience I'm a little jealous of. But Frank Serpico was an NYPD police officer and detective who was an honest cop, served honorably, and of his own accord, he exposed widespread corruption in the NYPD, which, as you pointed out, led to the Knapp Commission. So, that little misstep in the way you said it, kind of painting him as a dirty cop. No, he was the furthest thing from a dirty cop. So, whistleblowers are very important. It's something that, we need more of them to make this a better department for all of us. I mean, we all take such pride in our work as police officers. And when we have these bad guys, and I know you hate them too, like Michael Dowd, and the guys you're talking about last night, Caracappa and Ippolito, it just makes us all look bad. So, that's just my 2 cents, because I know Frank Serpico, he actually speaks up, with some of my clients when they, they're in the news or whatever, he'll comment on it. So thanks, Frank.
With regard to Frank, I stand corrected. And like I said, only thing I know about him is what you saw in the movie, that Al Pacino played him, and, never met him, don't know him, and don't know anybody that worked with him. So there you go.
Okay, so there you have it. There was the apology, but let me comment on something here. Phil Grimaldi said he never met Frank Serpico, didn't know anything about him. Yeah, he watched the movie. The movie starred Al Pacino. It's about 2 hours long. There is absolutely nothing in the Serpico movie that starred Al Pacino that even remotely indicates that Frank Serpico was a corrupt cop. It's all about his years of trying to get people to in the police department, the higher ups, to investigate the corruption. So I don't know, but here's what bothers me, folks. You got this guy Grimaldi, you got this sergeant, retired Bill Cannon, 27 years, homicide detective, and then you had Tommy Dades on the show, retired detective who was involved in the investigation of the corrupt mafia cops, and none of these guys were aware of the Frank Serpico story. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me that any cop, specifically a detective, either retired or currently on the NYPD, does not know the name Frank Serpico and what Frank Serpico did. Now, if that is indeed the case, then folks, there lies the problem, because Frank Serpico's story should be taught not only in the police academy at the NYPD, but in every police academy across this country. Because that's why to this day we still have problems with corruption and police misconduct. These stories, his story needs to be told. He is the quintessential role model, Frank Serpico is, for every police officer in this country, and those people who want to become police officers. So for 3 retired detectives, 2 did not say, hey, Phil, Frank Serpico was not corrupt. We need to fix that. But they didn't do it on Thursday, and they didn't do it on Thursday when it aired. They didn't do it on the 11th, which was Friday. But the reason why this apology came about, it's my understanding that Frank Serpico's attorney intervened, and that was the reason for the apology that occurred last night that you just heard. Now, I was just wondering, had there been no legal intervention, would have there been an apology? We don't know. But the remark was false, and what also bothers me is when that original episode aired, before it was pulled, the last I saw on the counter was pretty close to 3,000 viewers, and they boast on their show that their podcast is seen globally and they have international viewers. So at least a few thousand people saw that comment made by Phil Grimaldi that Frank Serpico was a corrupt narcotics cop or exposed corruption. There was no or about it. He exposed corruption. He was not a corrupt cop. So I just want to get that out. And another thing that kind of bothered me, and I don't know anything about these guys other than every now and then I pop into their podcast and watch different things. But during the original episode, and it is the one that they re-aired yesterday when they're talking about the mafia cops, Bill Cannon, they were talking about Michael Dowd, of the 7-5, that whole band of corrupt cops, and he went to prison and everything. And then Bill Cannon says, I don't understand how the NYPD allowed him to get away with this for all these years. That was another thing that kind of really bothered me, because you would think that, Bill Cannon advertises sometimes on the show that he's a former college professor or still is or does it part-time, is that he wasn't aware. The Michael Dowd case occurred 20 years after the Knapp Commission with Frank Serpico. It was 1993. Okay, the Mueller Commission was formed because of the Dowd investigation, And what people don't know is, if you don't know, now in episode 41, let me get it up on the screen here. I interviewed, let me get rid of that so you could see Joe's face there for a second. Okay. Episode 41, I talked to Frank Serpico, and we talked about Joe Trimboli. Joe Trimboli was the NYPD Field Internal Affairs Unit sergeant who for years was investigating Joe Trimboli. And for years, Joe Trimboli was getting stonewalled by the corrupt administration in the NYPD because they did not want him to expose the corruption. And it was a freaking disgrace because 7 years before Michael Dowd was arrested, the NYPD was fully aware of what Michael Dowd was doing. And Joe Trimboli right there was the sergeant, even on his own time, that was following Dowd and his band of corrupt cops. And he was getting stonewalled by his own police department. Now, I want to make a remark here about something that Frank Serpico was mentioned in a book by Mike McAlary. Let me get it up on the screen here for a second. And this is in episode 41 also. Okay, that's the book there. Good Cop, Bad Cop. Okay? And I'll get to Frank Serpico as mentioned in that book. But for now, I want you to listen to, there's an audio clip, and I played this in a podcast the other day. This is Joe Trimboli testifying at the Mullen Commission. It's a snippet. So let's get this on the screen here.
Sergeant Joseph Trimboli, a police investigator who for years tried unsuccessfully to bring some of the bad cops to justice, says that police brass looked the other way.
There was a lack of resolve to go after these individuals, and that it would be a tremendous embarrassment to the New York City Police Department.
Okay, so that was Joe Trimboli testifying in 1993 at the Mullen Commission, and you heard him. He was stonewalled. They didn't want him to do the investigation because it would be another embarrassment to the police department. But sadly, Joe Trimboli passed away January of last year of 2021. Episode 41 on my channel, Truth and Consequences. Watch it because it's Frank Serpico talking about Joe Trimboli. He was a friend of Joe Trimboli's. He supported him through all this stuff. But like I said, in the Good Cop, Bad Cop book, let me get that up on the screen here. Okay. This is an excerpt from the book. And the book was written, you see the author, Mike McAlary. He also passed away. I just want to read this for a second because it goes to what I just said about the NYPD, the corrupt administration, the NYPD stonewalling and going after Joe Trimboli for him going after and investigating Michael Dowd. Now, the sad part is that Joe Trimboli never got the opportunity to slap the handcuffs on Michael Dowd and his band of criminals. They were finally arrested by the Suffolk County Police Department in New York, out in Long Island, in a joint investigation with the DEA. But this is what Mike says in his book about Frank Serpico. He said, there was another alarm ringing out over the city that summer. Frank Serpico had heard that one too. A couple of weeks before, Serpico had walked into a diner. Someone handed him a newspaper. The headline screamed, "The New Serpico," and detailed the frustration of a police sergeant, Joseph Trimboli, to get anyone in a position of authority to act upon evidence of corruption in the NYPD. It was an old story, and the old Serpico had lived it once. The old Serpico, as he called himself, now recognized the comparison with the new Serpico. And then, quote, "Did they try and discredit Trimboli yet?" Serpico wanted to know. "I'm hearing that they're going to try and blame Trimboli because of their own oversights." And another Frank Serpico comment, "They don't want you to fuck up their system. They investigate you and not what you're saying." That was Frank Serpico. Now, the book is filled with, you got to read this book. It's a fantastic book. And the reason why I say that is, folks, is the movie that they made, this documentary, The 7-5, about Michael Dowd, it had very, very little in there about Joe Trimboli. Joe Trimboli is the hero of the Michael Dowd investigation. But because of corrupt officials at the time, and even Ray Kelly, who was at the beginning was not the commissioner, I think he was deputy commissioner, they were stonewalling Joe Trimboli's investigation because they did not want him to investigate those corrupt cops and have another scandal. So it's an excellent book, and you need to look at it. So remember, folks, let me get this over here. Okay. Remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit the red subscribe button. Audio podcasts of all my episodes are available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, and a bunch of other platforms. Support my independent investigative journalism if you can at paypal.me/Doug Poppa. I'm self-funded. I do investigative news stories also. And you all know I'm a former law enforcement officer, criminal investigator. I worked many years undercover. I lost my job because I exposed corruption 30 years ago, could never get back on a police department. I have 20 years experience in the hotel casino industry out here in Las Vegas as an investigator and director of security and surveillance at 2 properties. I worked for about a year also with Homeland Security out here. I'm now retired on Social Security. So I do these investigative stories because I get information from inside sources, a lot of it with the police department out here, the Las Vegas Metro Police. I do those investigative stories. I keep breaking one story after another about cover-ups orchestrated by the LVMPD Sheriff Joe Lombardo, who, by the way, is running for governor. And I have a lot more stories coming out. I have a real interesting story coming out in a couple of days that you'd be real interested in. So support my work if you can. I know times are tough. If you can't, not a big deal. I don't do this for money. I don't make money on these podcasts unless somebody donates some money from, into my PayPal account. I do it because, in essence, nobody else is doing it. So I'm glad Grimaldi apologized, but I don't think it was heartfelt. Like I said, it happened, and that video, the original one, was pulled and edited because Frank Serpico's attorney got involved, and that's why it was done. But and I'll say it again, I don't know for the life of me how any NYPD, not only detective, but any NYPD cop would not know the name of Frank Serpico and the story about Frank Serpico. If they don't, if there's a problem with the police department, because like I said, his story should be told. And so should the story about another corrupt cop who I knew personally. He's now deceased, Bob Lucy. They made the movie about him in the book, The Prince of the City. He was a corrupt cop who turned on other cops to keep himself out of prison. But he was a bad guy. He was a bad cop. Bob died a couple of years ago. And then you have the Dowd investigation. These are the stories that should be shown in an integrity class in every police department in the country, because people need to know, recruits need to know, this is what's going to happen to you if you cross the line and disgrace your badge. Frank Serpico was never a corrupt cop like Phil Grimaldi described him as on March 10th. He exposed widespread corruption. He testified against cops at a grand jury prior to him being shot in 1971 in a drug raid. He was shot in the face. He's a Medal of Honor recipient. So when I hear people disparaging his name for whatever reason, I'm going to call them out. And I'm glad this guy Grimaldi apologized. I just don't think it was a heartfelt apology. Listen, folks, again, thanks for listening, and continue to watch my podcast. Thank you.